Week 8 fantasy football running back tier list. This is where we break down my top 36 running backs so that you guys can set your lineups this week. We're going to be going over everything from usage to recent trends to injuries and all that good stuff. So make sure you stick around all the way to the end. If you get some value from this video, leave a like, subscribe if you're new around here. Now let's get into it. All right, so as always, if you want access to all of our weekly rankings, all of our rest of season rankings, that will be linked down below in the pinned comment. But let's start with the will they play tier. So a lighter week of injuries this week in week 8. This section took me like 2 hours last time I did it in week 7. But so far, as it stands right now, it looks like we're just waiting on news for Jerome Ford. He did return to practice on Friday after missing practice on Wednesday and Thursday. So it does look like he is truly questionable. There is a possibility that he plays, but I do have Kareem Hunt and Pierre Strong ranked as if, they're going to be the starting running backs this week, and Jerome Ford is going to be out. And then the other major injury who's already been since ruled out is David Montgomery, who should be back after the week 9 bye that the Detroit Lions have. So again, it's going to be another wheels up game for Jahmyr Gibbs. Now let's get into my locked in running back starts. So not a lot of analysis on my running backs 1 to 12. I'm going to highlight some usage for a couple of these guys and also which guys kind of have good matchups, which guys are in high-scoring game environments, and so on and so forth. So some of these elite running backs that are in good matchups, you guys can see there, Christian McCaffrey, Austin Eckler, Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, Isaiah Pacheco, and Raheem Mostert. And then the elite running backs that are in potential high-scoring games as well, Raheem Mostert, Jahmyr Gibbs, Isaiah Pacheco, Tony Pollard, Austin Eckler, and DeAndre Swift. And then some of these running backs that don't have very good matchups, we have Travis Etienne, Tony Pollard, Breece Hall, DeAndre Swift, Alvin Kamara, and Jonathan Taylor, all going up against pretty stingy run defenses. So keep that in mind. Upgrade some expectations for some of these guys, downgrade expectations for others. So not many usage changes of note in this top tier other than my RB6 Breece Hall and my RB7 Jahmyr Gibbs, who I'm just going to highlight here real quick. Breece Hall has taken the starting running back job for the Jets and run with it. So excited to see what he can do down the stretch of the NFL season, because in week 6, before the Jets week 7 bye, we saw this guy command 68% of the snaps, get most of the carries, finally get his full workload that we saw from him back last year before he tore his ACL. So very exciting news for Breece Hall. Definitely a guy that maybe you even want to buy low on going into this week, because I view him basically as a top 5 to 8 running back rest of the season. I definitely would consider selling high on Jahmyr Gibbs, because with Montgomery out last week and Craig Reynolds on one leg, they really force-fed Jahmyr Gibbs the ball, and this usage is great. We definitely love to see him get that, but David Montgomery will be back in week 10 after their week 9 bye, and even this week, I do think that Craig Reynolds will be more involved, so I don't think we're going to get the top 3 performance that we saw from Jahmyr Gibbs last week this week, but we still probably will get a solid performance out of him, so he is still a top 7 running back for me. Now let's get into the high-end RB2s. So these guys I'm going to go a little bit more in depth on, talk about their usage, their matchups, all that good stuff. So my running back 13 this week is Jonathan Taylor. Still not quite what we wanted in terms of overall usage for Jonathan Taylor, but definitely did vastly outperform Zach Moss last week. Since he's been back, that's the first time that's happened, and he looked like good old Jonathan Taylor. He was breaking off runs. He was scoring in the red zone. Zach Moss is also coming into this game with multiple injuries. He is listed questionable, so we could see a real breakout performance here for Jonathan Taylor as the healthier of the 2 running backs. Definitely a difficult matchup here, though, against the New Orleans Saints. They are pretty strong against fantasy running backs, although they did allow Travis Etienne to score twice on them last week. So keep that in mind for Jonathan Taylor. Pretty good start this week. Running back 14 right now for me is Josh Jacobs, who I think is a solid buy low right now, because he is averaging over 20 opportunities per game this season. We've seen multiple games of him well over 25 opportunities as well, and he's been without Jimmy Garoppolo. So I can't really blame him to have down performances, because the Raiders' offense has been anemic without Jimmy G out there. They play on Monday Night Football this week, so we don't really have official word yet that Jimmy G will be playing. I'll update the pinned comment down below if we get any word that he's going to be out or whatever, and move Josh Jacobs down accordingly. But for right now, I think that Jimmy Garoppolo will be back. It's a really tough matchup against the Detroit Lions, one of the best run defenses in the NFL. They're 5th best according to my matchup chart. But again, Josh Jacobs, 77% of the snaps on the year. He's getting like 80% of the carries. He's a full-fledged workhorse, and he has to be in your lineup as a top 15 running back every single week, regardless of matchup, regardless of who his quarterback is. So running back 15, we have Kenneth Walker. A little scare that we had on Thursday's practice report. Kenneth Walker popped up with a lower body injury there, but it looks like he will be a full go on Sunday, as will be his backfield mate, Zach Charbonnet, who was out with a hamstring injury last week. No limitations this week. It's a tough matchup against the Browns. Of course, we don't want to see our running backs go up against them, but Jonathan Taylor and Zach Moss had no problem getting after him last week. So I do think Kenneth Walker, the usage has been unbelievable the last 3 games that they've played. Before the bye week in week 4, he had 71% of the snaps. In week 6, right after the bye week, 76%. Last week, he had 79%. This guy is getting everything under the sun with Zach Charbonnet. I mean, it looks like it's not going to happen this year. Maybe it happens towards the end of the season. I did actually sell Kenneth Walker this past week, but I'm still very confident that he's going to be a top 10 running back for the rest of the year. Running back 16 for me is Joe Mixon. Same story with Joe Mixon every single week. 70+% of the snaps, an elite workload on an offense that I do think will really bounce back here. The Cincinnati Bengals, now that they've had a bye week to get Joe Burrow healthy, and that was the key. Joe Burrow wasn't healthy, and that's why they were playing poorly. That should really help. And running back 2 range is where Joe Mixon's going to live. He's a mid RB2 every single week because he's a volume play. He's the type of guy that can fall into the end zone. He's going to get 15, 18 carries a week and catch a couple balls here and there, but he's definitely not a very good running back. So this is where he's going to live rest of the season. And same goes really for Derrick Henry, who RB17 is probably the lowest I've had Derrick Henry ever in a while, at least, because we got a top 10 run defense with the Atlanta Falcons. We have Will Levis, the rookie quarterback from Kentucky, making his first start, and the lowest game over-under of the week on the entire slate at 35 points. So all of that being said, it's not setting up to be a very good Derrick Henry game. They're probably going to be losing, which means we're going to see a lot of Tajay Spears. Henry's not a must start in shallow leagues. If you guys are in, 12-man leagues, you probably have to throw him into your lineup. But if you guys are in 8 or 10-man leagues and you have, some of the running backs I've talked about already, I don't think Derrick Henry is a must start this week. And I would temper expectations for those of you guys that are in 12-man leagues and have to start him, because I don't love Will Levis making his first start. Maybe he'll surprise me, but I didn't love him as a prospect. I don't really think he's ready to start yet. And I think if he was, he would have beaten out Ryan Tannehill at some point in the early portion of the season or in the offseason. So running back 18 for me is Ramondre Stevenson, closing out this high-end RB2s tier. Ramondre Stevenson's usage has really corrected itself, which is good news for Ramondre Stevenson managers, because we were looking pretty hairy there around week 5 when he was getting 51% of the snaps. But this offense is really unpredictable. We don't know if we're going to get good Mac Jones or terrible Mac Jones. There is no in-between. He either plays pretty well or he plays like the worst quarterback in the NFL. Ramondre Stevenson does have a really good matchup this week. The Patriots and Dolphins are division rivals, so they should play this game a little bit tighter. 29th against fantasy football running backs are the Miami Dolphins, and Ramondre Stevenson did perform against the Dolphins way back in week 2. So fire him up this week. He's probably going to have another good game, but if he does, I would probably suggest that you sell high on Ramondre Stevenson and get out of this offense overall. So my low-end RB2s here, the first 2 guys kicking this off have already played this week on Thursday Night Football. We have Rachaad White and James Cook. With Rachaad White at RB19, he had a solid performance, season-high 7 targets, 16 opportunities overall, and 18 PPR points. You'll definitely take that out of low-end RB2 type of option like Rachaad White is. Eventually, he was bound to have some games like this, and hopefully these continue. He actually looked like he had some running room for once, and he was able to be used in the passing game, which is what I think they should be doing with him, because it's very difficult to run with how bad our interior offensive line is. And then with James Cook, also played on Thursday Night Football, classic James Cook line, right? 8.3 PPR points, 14 really efficient carries, but can't find the end zone because Josh Allen is doing everything down in that area of the field. He's running touchdowns in, he's throwing to Gabe Davis, he's throwing to Dalton Kincaid. Not the type of game that you want to see out of James Cook. Absolutely loving that as an Allen, Kincaid, and Gabe Davis manager, but I'm sure a lot of you guys that have James Cook were a little bit annoyed that he couldn't find the end zone or he couldn't really get there this week. Running back 21 for me is my start of the week. Again, going back to the Javonte Williams well as my start of the week for the second week in a row. 19 opportunities this past week, season high, and really the highest since early on in his second year. 80 PFF rushing grade for the second week in a row as well. First time that has happened since his rookie season. So we're starting to see Javonte Williams of old come back to light. And I talked about this on the trade targets video. Definitely send some offers for Javonte Williams before this game, because I think this is going to be the breakout game for him. It's not an easy matchup by any means. They're fourth best against fantasy running backs, but I like Javonte Williams to break out nonetheless. He's actually performed pretty well against Kansas City. 2 weeks ago, he had a pretty good game against them efficiency-wise, and I think this is the game that we see, 20-plus opportunities, Javonte Williams getting into the end zone, all that good stuff. So definitely make sure to go buy low on him before this week starts. Running back 22 is Dameon Pierce, a guy that I'm also tempted to buy low on right now, because if I knew Dameon Pierce was going to go back to his week 4 and 5 workload, like you guys can see there, where he got like 59% of the snaps or whatever, I'd have him much higher than this. I'd probably have him in my top 16, top 17 overall running backs this week, because the Panthers are 31st in adjusted fantasy points allowed to fantasy running backs. This is one of the easiest matchups in the league, notoriously, for fantasy RBs are the Carolina Panthers, and Dameon Pierce could have a real get-right spot in this matchup. So if you guys can send out some offers for Dameon Pierce, if you can get him for RB3 type of price tags, which he should be available for right now, because as you can see right there, before the bye week happened, Devin Singletary outsnapped him, which I'm not sure is something that we really want to read too much into. Maybe Dameon Pierce was dealing with something and it wasn't really reported fully. I'm not exactly sure what that usage was about, but as of right now, I have to believe that's a blip on the radar. It's a 1 week thing. That's not really going to be a trend. It's possible. Make sure Devin Singletary is rostered, but I do actually lean on the side that Dameon Pierce will bounce back this week in a really good matchup. So RB23 for me is D'Onta Foreman of the Chicago Bears. Definitely a pretty good play this week. I wouldn't be expecting last week's performance where he was like the RB1 on the week and, fireworks everywhere, and people in your league are probably really high on D'Onta Foreman right now. But if I were you, I would sell high. If you have D'Onta Foreman on your roster, we got to remember that prior to Roschon Johnson's concussion, who was out last week and he was out the week before, he made Foreman so irrelevant that he was inactive on game days. So, in my opinion, Roschon Johnson is the back to own in this backfield going forward. I'm not sure if that's going to materialize right away because Roschon is coming off of a multi-week injury, but I do expect him to at least give a big dent into D'Onta Foreman's workload from last week. It's a good matchup, but expect probably a 50-50 split in this backfield, and I do expect Roschon Johnson to look the better of the two because I think he's the better running back. But keep that in mind. D'Onta Foreman, a fine start, but not a guy that you probably want to hold on to. Sell high on that big performance in more casual leagues where people are going to look at the box score. See if you can get yourself up to a better option. Maybe you can sell Foreman for Dameon Pierce or for Javonte Williams right now. Maybe you just have to use like a low-end bench piece to get that done. That's definitely something I would be doing. Closing out this tier, we have running back 24, Chuba Hubbard. And Chuba Hubbard and Miles Sanders, it's a little bit of a sketchy situation right now because we don't really know who the starter is, but Chuba Hubbard is the better running back. Miles Sanders was not on the injury report this past week. They did have a bye week to get healthy, but head coach Frank Wright has come out and said that this will be a hot hand approach, and the hot hand this season has been Chuba Hubbard. So maybe that's going to mean it's a 50-50 split, and whoever's playing better is going to get the touches and that kind of thing. Chuba Hubbard is my preference this week of the two Carolina Panthers running backs, but we'll definitely monitor this usage, and I will report this in next week's video because I really don't know how this backfield is going to shake out right now. But as of right now, again, I would say Chuba Hubbard is like a flex play or like a low-end RB2. Getting into the actual flex plays tier, we're going to kick this off with running back 25, Gus Edwards. The Ravens backfield is becoming a lot like the Washington Commanders, which is nice because then we can actually predict what's going to happen. When the Ravens win, it's Gus Edwards who's, salting the clock away and getting a lot of carries. When they're trailing or the game's pretty close, it looks like Justice Hill is more involved. But this week's game is against the Arizona Cardinals, so it looks like I would expect a solid workload out of Gus Edwards because they're, over touchdown favorite against the Cardinals. They just blew out a really good team in the Detroit Lions. I think he's one of the better starts this week. If you guys are in need of like a sneaky flex play, Gus Edwards should be a good option. I think he'll probably have 15, 20 carries, maybe find the end zone in this game. You could even make the argument to start him over guys like Chuba Hubbard who are in a little bit more of uncertain situations. Running back 26 for me on the week is Alexander Mattison. After a spike week of trending positive usage last week, I told you guys to sell high on this guy. After that Bears game, we saw that Alexander Mattison spiked all the way up to 78% of the snaps, and I didn't expect that to it continues. So we saw Cam Akers take a bigger piece of this backfield in week 7. I would not be at all shocked to see this backfield go right to a 50-50, or maybe even Cam Akers edge out Alexander Mattison for the job. It's a good matchup for Alexander Mattison against the Green Bay Packers, but he's just so mid. Like, he's just not a good running back. So I don't really expect him to hold this job very much longer if Cam Akers continues to look good. So running back 26 for me, Alexander Mattison, not excited about starting him. Running back 27 for me in my rankings is Aaron Jones. And I would say he would be ranked a lot higher if it wasn't for the health question marks that I have for him, because head coach Matt LaFleur has come out and said that Aaron Jones still isn't 100%. He's still not recovered from a hamstring injury that happened back in week 1. It sounds like he re-aggravated it in like week 4 or something like this. This is why we don't draft old running backs, right? Because this type of shit can happen. And this is why you should have been selling him after week 1 when he started to work his way back from the injury. In week 2, week 3, he was close to playing or whatever. After yet another week of limited practice for Aaron Jones, where I'm not confident that he's healthy, and it sounds like his head coach has come out and said he's not healthy, I would expect another, 14-touch performance. And how much is that really going to help your fantasy lineup if Aaron Jones is not 100% either? I don't know why they don't just sit him down again and let him get 100% healthy, but another 14 middling touches for a little bit of production is probably what I'm expecting. And I do think A.J. Dillon is in play if you guys are desperate. But Aaron Jones is going to probably be active and probably going to make nobody from this backfield startable, at least in shallower league formats. Running back 28 for me on the week is Brian Robinson. Brian Robinson, usually not this low, but him and the Commanders, they have a tall task against Philadelphia this week. They do notoriously play well against Philadelphia, so maybe this will be a close game, but they are touchdown underdogs. I don't think he's a must start by any means, considering he's had less than 10 carries in 2 of the last 3 games, and the Commanders are touchdown underdogs, like I said. So usually when that happens, we see a lot more of Antonio Gibson. We saw Chris Rodriguez work into the backfield a little bit last week. I'm not predicting a blowout or anything, but the Eagles' defensive line versus the Commanders' offensive line is one of the biggest mismatches of the entire slate. There's just really nothing stacking up in favor of Brian Robinson. It's not going to be a good game script. The matchup is bad. The backfield has seen some changes with Chris Rodriguez getting some work, and Brian Robinson fell below 50% of the snaps last week. So it's just making nobody from this backfield startable, and that's definitely not what we want. So running back 29 for me is Kareem Hunt. I would not get super excited about Kareem Hunt even after last week's performance, and even if Jerome Ford is out, I probably wouldn't move him up much more than this. But as of right now, I'm tentatively ranking him as if he's going to be the lead back here. Pierre Strong should be heavily involved like we saw last week, and we do have another game of PJ Walker, so I don't really love that this offense is probably not going to move very well, even though they scored a lot of points last week. That was mostly due to the defense and turnovers and that kind of thing. I may move Kareem Hunt up here slightly if we do get word that Jerome Ford is going to be out, but as of right now, I think he's just a flex play. Running back 30 for me is Darrell Henderson. Darrell Henderson commanded the lion's share of the backfield for the Rams right off of the street, right? He was signed and then he was immediately the starter. Now he has the tall task of trying to best the Dallas Cowboys run defense, which I don't think is going to go very well. So I'd sit him unless you have, no better options, because he's a good volume play, but with no buys this week, there's no need to play a guy like this. You could just play a wide receiver in your flex or whatever. If he's your RB2, you're probably in big trouble, but if he's a flex play for you, I'd probably leave him on the bench. So in terms of deeper league flex plays, in case you guys don't have any of the running backs I talked about and you need somebody to throw into your flex, Najee Harris is a fine option. He found the end zone last week in a tough matchup. Steelers got another tough one this week against Jacksonville, so keep that in mind, as is his backfield mate Jaylen Warren, who's efficient on his touches. Of course, we know that about him. Amari DiMercado for the Cardinals recorded 79% of the snaps in Week 7. Solid matchup this week. Kyler Murray probably won't be back, but he will be back in Week 9 by the looks of it. Roshan Johnson also not listed on the final injury report. I would definitely say the safe play is Deontay Foreman, but I do think Roshan Johnson is a good desperation play if you guys are screwed this week. And then Devin Singletary, it's a great matchup this week, as I mentioned with Dameon Pierce. He did outsnap him before the bye. Not outrageous to see Devin Singletary do that again. And then finally, closing out my top 36, we have Tajay Spears. Definitely make sure he's rostered, because we're getting word that Derrick Henry might be traded, and definitely even maybe send some offers in your own fantasy league. The Titans are starting Will Levis, like I said, and I expect the young quarterback to check down a lot, and I expect them to be losing. So Tajay Spears will be on the field quite a bit in this game. So if you guys enjoyed this video, if you got some value from it, leave a like down below, subscribe to the channel if you are new around here. If you want access to all of my weekly rankings, all of my rest of season rankings, all of my dynasty rankings, you can get access to that on flockfantasy.com. Use the promo code FSE when you sign up for 30% off any of the packages, monthly, annually, whatever. If you sign up annually, you'll get 6 months for free as well. So definitely check that out if you're interested. And also make sure to check out our big sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. Use the promo code FSE to get some, stake in the game, do some pick'ems, 100% back up to $100. And right now, new customers can get a boosted pick'em special. So make sure to take advantage of that. And of course, when you use the promo code FSE, you'll get 100% match back on whatever you put in. So definitely check out those offers if you guys are interested. Link will be down below in the pinned comment as well as in the description. But with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.